So excited to have my friend andrew.nack on the Nuclear Talent Show today. Andy is a rising star who is already shaping the nuclear industry's approach to digital INC. He provides training courses through and consults with famous industry institutes. And this entire interview is just the teaser trailer for more in-depth lessons that Andy is providing on the NRC's new Regulatory Guide 1250 on digital INC commercial grade dedication, as well as Branch Technical Position 719, Revision 9, on software common cause failures. You can access those lessons for free by registering at nucleartalentboost.com as part of our free Nuclear INC certificate curriculum. Andy will soon be called Dr. Nack when he finishes his studies at Tennessee's nuclear engineering program. So welcome to the Nuclear Talent Show, Andy.
Thank you. Yeah. I don't consider the PhD like done in the bag, so it's kind of a hopeful. Eventually we'll get to that point.
I'm sure it will happen.
That is the goal. So I
Yeah.
appreciate the opportunity to come on here and speak. I started out actually after college in the Department of Energy realm. I'm down here in East Tennessee near the Oak Ridge National Lab. So that was the context of where I started out as a instrumentation and controls engineer. Then after a couple years there, I ended up working at a company that's changed names a couple times, but it's currently Paragon, where I did commercial grade dedication and equipment qualification for 10 years or so. And that was a helpful time, learned a lot while working there. I was able to get involved in a lot of industry groups like the IEEE Nuclear Power Engineering Committee to help with maintenance and creation of standards that are used throughout the commercial nuclear power industry. I got an opportunity to get involved with some IAEA document creation preparation. Then also NEI did some work. As you mentioned, the NEI 1706, I had the opportunity to kind of end up being the lead author for that one and got to experience getting something endorsed by the NRC. And so that was an adventure.
Got to sit through all those boring public meetings and all that.
Yeah, when you actually are expected to talk and give answers, it's not quite as boring, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's like, oh, I need to be able to explain their or answer their questions and all that.
Yeah.
So, it
Politely in the public forum.
yeah, exactly. Try to be as diplomatic as possible. But yeah, that's what ended up with Reg Guide 1250 being issued a couple years back. That's kind of an ongoing work of getting people aware of that guidance and helping people understand the benefits that it can provide and getting people to start using it.
So, Andy, I think that at a high level, Regulatory Guide 1250 is creating this great upgrade to the nuclear industry by allowing these non-nuclear components to get into plants. And so some of these non-nuclear digital instruments, they're installed in orders of magnitude more chemical and aerospace and other industry applications, where the consequences of failure can be just as bad, maybe even worse, as like a nuclear situation. The competition is rather fierce in these industries. Someone trying to sell you like instrument A, like is dealing with instrument vendor B, C, D, E, F through 2 alphabets worth of vendors trying to also sell these safety related digital instruments for these. Someone's going to die immediately if this instrument fails sorts of situations. Almost as like a free market, first principles, it must be so. It's just inevitable that better equipment would emerge out of those fields and these competitions than the relatively uncompetitive semi-monopoly nuclear equivalent, the 2 INC manufacturers that are left and have been
Yeah.
making the same product for like 50 years. Regulatory Guide 1250 is allowing nuclear companies to have this huge upgrade to non-nuclear equipment and like open up their vendor pool and all these things with great cost and safety benefits. You know, these are cheaper, better performing things. He said you were the lead author of the NEI document that ended up turning into Reg Guide 1250 essentially. And I know that often with these documents, it's sort of like an authorship by committee. So I'm sure there's like three other people that can claim at least that they're the ones that actually wrote it. And any one of you three will take credit for anything that someone finds noble and then blame the other author for any stinkers that ended up in it. But
Of
I've in
course, of
reading,
course.
it's a shame that more people don't know about it yet because I think it just came out 2021, 2022, and everyone in the world had bigger things on their minds with the pandemic and the fallout from that and things of this nature. This super helpful, prudent regulatory guide 1250 just like snuck into the scene. Not as many people are running with it as I think should be. I know that there are some who are putting it to good use already, but tell us more about what is Regulatory Guide 1250? What's it about?
Yeah, so what that red guide is doing is it's the NRC endorsing NEI 1706, saying this is an acceptable approach to performing commercial grade dedication of digital equipment. And so historically, the approach to that was based on EPRI TR 106439, which is an enhancement of EPRI's early commercial grade dedication guidance of EPRI NP 5652.
I love how all
So,
these numbers are just burned on
yeah,
the back of your hand.
yeah, and they build off of each other here. Before this most recent guidance, a good place to start is with the TR 106439 guidance. Critical characteristics were given three different categories. The important one is dependability critical characteristic. I think we call them out in 1706, but the dependability critical characteristics are historically the ones that have been most difficult, time consuming, and expensive to deal with. So dependability critical characteristics would be the ones that would drive having to engage with a commercial vendor and dig into their development process, their design process, and their implementation process, dig into the design to understand the approach that they use to ensure the software perform correctly. You would often run into issues like the vendor's not even interested in working with you, and so
Yeah.
you're not even going to get access to any of the information that you need.
Yeah, like these
And
these vendors are selling thousands of these units, these instruments or control systems. They're selling like tens of thousands of these to like chemical and other industries, and then the nuclear guys trounces in and says, "I would like to buy two of your units, and could you also like spend 4,000 hours like and giving me all
right,
of your proprietary information
yeah, tell me all your secrets,
to
show me
make this
everything.
small sale, like please." And it almost
Yes,
never works out, right?
right,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, and
So
by the way, it's not even a guarantee that you're going to show me all your documents and I'm going to say, okay, I'll buy it. I'm just going to waste all your time and then make a stink about how your quality is not totally conforming to my random rubric.
right,
And
yeah, not quite enough upside to really make people
yeah.
interested typically. So what this new guidance does is it utilizes the IEC 61508 certification that a lot of these vendors are already pursuing. That is what is necessary for being able to put their equipment into safety applications in non-nuclear applications. So there's a lot of chemical processing, oil and gas, even Food and Drug Administration, FDA regulated industries that have these applications that are safety sensitive. And it turns out they care about all the same things that the nuclear guys care about. And so once you understand that this certification is covering the same things that the nuclear industry cares about, it's like, okay, well, let's leverage what they're already doing instead of making them repeat everything. So that's what NEI 1706 and Reg Guide 1.250 is doing, is it's allowing the nuclear industry to leverage that certification So that certification indicates that first, this manufacturer is actually interested and willing for their products to be in safety applications. They've done a lot of the types of processes necessary to design the item to be dependable in these high risk applications. And second of all, it means somebody else has already checked their work to confirm that they did everything correctly. And so it's like, okay, instead of repeating all that, we're going to utilize it with this additional framework. So in the US, we still have the 10 CFR Appendix B QA requirements that we have to juggle. And so commercial grade dedication and the way this new guidance is set up is it allows us to take credit for that non-nuclear QA work that's being done, utilize it to have confidence in these products being suitable for nuclear applications, and also fitting it into the nuclear QA framework so that it's acceptable for use.
That was a perfect explanation. And for those who don't understand what commercial grade dedication is and what 10 CFR 50 Appendix B is, we've got other videos in our Nuclear Talent Boost training library system that cover all those different topics. So they can go there and.
Good.
But I think that you've done it justice. So thanks for that explanation, Andy.
Glad to be able to provide it. The issues moving forward are that to implement a digital item at this stage in the game is typically involving a mod to the plant design. So it's not typically just an easy equivalency evaluation to swap out this previously analog device for this digital device. So while this guidance has made the commercial grade dedication aspect more efficient, the aspect that's still causing people to be slow to put it into practice is that they still have to deal with other issues like justifying common cause failure and of a digital item and working through all the different complications that go into trying to bring in a digital item into the plant.
Yeah.
So,
But we are living in a new era because Revision 9 of Branch Technical Position 719 has just, at the time of this recording, which is May 2024, it just hit the streets. All right. This is another project that yourself and several other noble souls seeking to get the nuclear industry to help itself and get better equipment into its plant that's going to make things safer and cheaper and just better for everyone. BTP 719 Rev 9, as it's referred to, that's addressing at least one of these other issues, the common cause failure stuff. So would you like to speak about life in the world before and life in the world after Rev 9 of BTP 719?
yeah, a lot of what the changes that are happening right now are centered around that DEG. And the DEG, if people aren't aware of it or familiar with it, that's something that I highly recommend. It's a whole suite of methodologies to deal with the issues related to utilizing digital equipment.
The EPRI Digital Engineering Guide, which you can go on to EPRI's website, and I think if your power plant is already a member of the Electric Power Research Institute, they might just have access to this for free already as part of that subscription. Or else it's usually a pretty decent chunk of change to actually like buy just that document. So just Googling EPRI Digital Engineering Guide will reveal dozens of slide PowerPoints that give you like the gist of about what's in there. It's something that you can tell, and I think they might even explicitly say this, like this looks very similar to ISA 84, which is a scheme used by several other industries in digital INC engineering. Someone who's like a chemical engineer, INC expert, who's familiar with ISA 84, he would just read this like the back of his hand and be like, yep, this is like ISA 84, and I've been doing this for years. Thanks for finally catching up, nuclear industry.
Exactly. And that's definitely one of the focuses that EPRI has had is trying to also look at other industries and realize other people have actually already figured a lot of this stuff out. So let's just find their best practices and bring them into the nuclear industry. The whole systems engineering concept is kind of the base of a lot of it. There's an organization called INCOSE, INCOSE, that's all about systems engineering, and a lot of valuable information is available on there. If people were to join that organization, they've got a great website that gets into what is this systems engineering concept. The EPRI DEG is built pretty heavily on a systems engineering mindset. Other industries have already figured this stuff out, put it to use, and now it's important for us to kind of catch up.
Yeah. It is funny that you say systems engineering. In my own personal career life, I grew up touching components and stuff and thinking about components and caring about components. And it really is almost like a different language to be thinking in terms of system engineering. It's almost like sometimes longtime nuke people will just like scoff at even the mere mention of system engineering.
And that's definitely an important concept to understand is the INCOSE style of system engineering is not what we're familiar with when we think about, okay, who's the system engineer for this system in the plant? It's a very different
That's
concept.
right.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, that's an important distinction people should understand for sure. What you're saying about ISA 84, the best aspect of the implementation of that within the DEG suite is the process called DRAM. So within the DEG suite, HAZCADS is the part that addresses what are the hazards and helps you figure out what your requirements should be for mitigating hazards, and which uses some of the non-nuclear concepts a little bit, but it's kind of its own new thing as well, the way it's utilizing STPA with the PRA. So I don't know that a lot of industries do that exactly the same way. That's motivated though by the PRA is something that plants are already
It just
implementing. So
already is there in
yeah, it's like
excruciating detail, so
we've
why
got
not make
this,
use of it?
exactly, we've got this
Where-
huge model. We might as well use it for something.
Whereas almost no other industry would like, they would think we were insane to have such a detailed model. So,
Exactly. So that leads you into the DRAM or the, I pulled it up so I can read this one, Digital
okay.
Reliability Analysis Methodology. DRAM is where you get into making sure you're designing a system that appropriately mitigates the hazards that were identified during HAZCADS. And a lot of what you'll find in DRAM will line up real well with approaches in ISA 84. And it also pretty heavily leans on the standard that we were talking about with NEI 1706, which is that IEC 61508. DRAM is really the heart of where you start getting into how are other industries implementing systems to address these hazards. DRAM is really the key for pulling a lot of that into the nuclear realm. When you understand what's all going on with the DEG suite, and as you start getting that implemented into the plant, going back to the common cause failure issue with the new BTP and NEI 2007, it's okay, now that we've got this mature process for ensuring we're putting together good systems, we should be able to take some credit for that when we're looking at the potential for a common cause failure being lower. NEI 2007 is still in the development phase. I don't know that the most recent version is actually issued yet, but I think it's coming out soon. The safety case is a graphical way to address an argument and explain an argument. But the very top of the safety case is the goal. And so the goal stated in 2007 is vulnerabilities to digital CCF have been adequately identified and addressed commensurate with the risk significance of the proposed digital INC system. So that's the goal of D3. That's the goal of everything. And so you're going to now use this safety case argument to take credit for aspects that are being implemented through the DEG suite of methodologies to achieve that goal. That's the motivation there that's hopefully going to get to a more reasonable place when it comes to addressing common cause failure.
Yeah, because there's the more reasonable place about what you actually have in the plant, and then the more reasonable place of like, how much time do I have to spend arguing with the NRC, and how much ink do I have to spill internally to like justify what's in the plant. And so previously, it being this huge nightmare of a hassle that just made everyone say, oh, digital INC is not worth it. I'm just going to keep making these analog. Even if you did deploy a digital instrument, you would oftentimes end up having at least a non-safety related digital instrument from a different manufacturer as the backup that addresses the common cause failure, which, you know, you're talking about having an extra penetration into the process system and like all these other things that go along with having a redundant non-safety measurement to back up your supposedly bulletproof digital safety related instrument. You're saying essentially that backup non-safety digital instrument is probably going to go away in most applications at this point, which is to me such a relief and victory for sanity.
We're definitely moving away from that additional system is required to be there. There may be applications where that still is appropriate, but it's not always required that that's appropriate. That's kind of where we're trying to head. If there is sufficient proof that the safety system has sufficient systematic integrity, another buzzword for you there. If you have sufficient systematic integrity, that is saying you have sufficient confidence that the system lacks systematic errors or issues in the design that make the likelihood of common cause failure sufficiently low already. So you don't need to implement a additional system to perform that safety function. Because of the measures that you're using, you already have sufficient confidence to address common cause failure. That's another terminology thing that causes some issues for nuclear people is when you get outside of nuclear, common cause failure is a term, but it's not used in the same way. Outside of nuclear, systematic integrity or systematic failure is a term more often used. The typical thought of common cause failure is really something that happens because of a lack of systematic integrity. So it's kind of like sort of a subset. Within nuclear, common cause failure is sometimes talked about so broadly that it's like we don't even necessarily have specific parallel instances of a device in the system. We're just saying generically common cause failure. Outside of nuclear, people would say, does it have sufficient systematic integrity? They're only going to talk about common cause failure if they've got like two parallel channels of a system and two identical items lining up. They use the term common cause failure in a much more specific situation.
That's really valuable because these sorts of translation linguistic things, the nuclear person and the non-nuclear person care about the exact same thing. They're both addressing everything. It's just that one's classifying this, and then like the total Venn diagrams there, and the other person's addressing it with like 4 different things that still fill the same Venn diagram. But a chemical industry INC engineer will interview for a nuclear position, and they'll use common cause failure in the wrong context or like use other of these translation things, and the nuclear hiring manager is just left with the impression that like man, this guy's an idiot. They don't even do common cause failure in their industry. How is he going to make my plant safe? It's just this tragedy because that chemical INC engineer might actually be the best person in the world at this thing that you want to be done. But because of this language gap, there's this huge misunderstanding that prevents such a needed widening of the talent pool, in my opinion. And that's sort of the goal of this project, is to help make nuclear industry people better at what they do already and to help people transition in, learn the language.
Definitely agree.
I think
Translating the language is a key part.
I still think that like the cream of our nuclear INC crop is like the best of the best. And Nuclear Talent Scout is by all means also specializing in delivering that established nuclear talent better than competing staffing firms. That's sort of like our bread and butter, is we already know the nuclear specific INC guy and gals. So kind of like how Reg Guide 1250 is bringing in great non-nuclear INC equipment to the nuclear industry. Andy, do you think a chemical, aerospace, or other industry INC professional could bring diversity and a lot of value to the nuclear workforce if they get coached through Nuclear Talent Boost?
I agree. I think one of the benefits of bringing in engineers from outside the nuclear industry is that it forces both sides to think about why we do what we do. Translation of language, like we've talked about, is really just an indication of needing to understand the fundamental principles of what it means to design a good system and a safe system. And so I think one of the issues with nuclear, if we keep ourselves in a silo, we tend to forget why we're doing what we're doing. We just start going through the motions of, we do D3 because we always do D3, and we forget, why is this even important?
Yeah.
And when is it not important? And as you bring in those outside perspectives, it helps you to take a step back and think more deeply. And for me personally, that's kind of my focus, even as I'm going back to school and continuing to learn. It's that I want to understand the bases for why we do what we do. And I think that improves the industry overall. It allows us to understand in what situations can we do something more efficiently when we really understand why we're doing what we're doing. And I think a lot of benefit comes from that outside perspective and understanding the why.
That is the most well said I've ever heard that concept. So thank you so much, Andy. So we want to talk through what is SIL. One term that can slip people up, both in nuclear land and non-nuclear land, is this concept of SIL, which is the identical three-letter acronym SIL, but it has two different meanings. So two different terms with the same acronym, and both of these terms get into very much similar sounding things, yet they're, to the expert eye, are quite different, but people use them as synonyms. So what is safety integrity level of IEC 61508, and what is software integrity level of IEEE 1012?
Yeah, like you said, it sounds very similar, but in reality, they're very different things. So, just as a footnote, the latest revision of IEEE 1012 has dropped the S to try to deal with this
Oh,
issue. So,
wow. So it's
um,
just, there's now SIL and ill.
exactly.
That is the illest thing I've ever heard.
So, there's an engineer in the nuclear industry named Dave Hooten that, if you don't know, he's a great guy to know. He's, I think, the secretary of IEEE 1012, and
Nice.
I think he has made sure people are aware of this issue that we've been experiencing, and was able to push through the dropping of the S.
God
So,
bless him.
yeah. So Dave Hooten is the man. And Dave Hooten is also heavily involved with EPRI and the DEG and all that kind of stuff. So there's multiple
Nice.
reasons to know Dave Hooten. Safety integrity level, I think, is best thought of as
To hear the rest of this part of the conversation, please follow the link in the show notes to the free learning activity on this subject at nucleartalentboost.com. Now, back to the show.
IEEE 1012 still 4. I feel like it's gotten better in the circles that I'm involved in, but a couple years ago, I would be talking to people about IEC 61508 SIL levels, and all of a sudden everyone's minds are like, well, SIL 4 is what's required. We have to use SIL 4. And it took a while to translate even this issue that you brought up of, hey, well, there's different versions of SIL, and the one that you're saying has to be SIL 4 is different.
Well, I guess we're back to the moral of the story. God bless Dave Hooton for eliminating the double SIL. However, the old term SIL instead of IL will continue on in documents for decades and in the hearts of nuclear men for centuries, I'm sure.
Yes.
I think one other thing, just to put in perspective, I think all of this different IEC 61508 safety and integrity level stuff is that I was recently at this non-nuclear industry instrumentation and controls conference. I saw this chemical INC engineer, world-renowned expert, bragging about how he spent a little bit of extra time to do a small fault tree analysis, and he showed why he could get away with only using SIL 1 instead of SIL 2 and save so much money for his customers by using SIL 1 instead of SIL 2 to protect this huge tank of gaseous chemicals that's right next to a crowded seaport. And this chemical bath tank thing, if it gets out, these gases are just fatal to inhale at a very minuscule 100 parts per million airborne concentration. You look at that and you look at the nuclear power plant sited out in the middle of nowhere, and we have maybe worst case scenario of 100 things go wrong. Someone might receive a dose of radiation that 20 years from now might increase his risk of cancer by like 10%. We would be crawling over each other, and indeed we are, to try to use SIL 2 instead of SIL 4, software integrity level 4, not just safety integrity level 4. And I just felt it was an anecdote worth sharing to put in perspective why all of your different work to help get regulatory guide 1250 out into the nuclear sphere's use. That's just such a monumental achievement. But at the same time, when comparing to what other industries do, it's a step in the right direction, but we have so much further to go, right?
Yes, I agree. A lot of times I think of Red Guide 1.250 as hopefully at least making sure people have heard of IEC 61508 safety integrity levels. A lot of people in nuclear, this may be their first instance even learning about the concept. So a lot of ways I do feel like it's just a foot in the door, making people aware of some of this world outside of nuclear. Mm-hmm. So yeah, there's a lot more to go beyond that for sure. Yeah. The example that you're talking about is just an illustration of the difference that risk informing the design can do. So in that chemical process industry application, there was probably the use of LOPA, layers of protection analysis.
Yep, that's right.
So he had so much passive safety built into the system that the INC was only needed for risk reduction of a SIL 1 level. It makes a lot of sense when you dig into the full picture of it, because the INC system isn't actually all that important for reducing the risk, or maybe the overall risk is already close to a tolerable level, so you don't need as much risk reduction from your INC system. That is a major difference between what process industries, other safety critical but non-nuclear industries have that the nuclear industry is in need of as we're moving into implementing different designs and plants of various sizes that come with it inherently different levels of overall risk. Mm-hmm. A lot more work to do.
I'd say that's the fun part of being in the advanced nuclear reactor world. We are setting these new precedents and learning from what we've already done and trying to apply something better here to drive down the costs of advanced reactors. without sacrificing safety. It's a super fun field to be in. Some of the ground that was already plowed, for example, on the safety integrity level in control systems stuff, you were telling me, and I looked up in the NRC's library and confirmed on the public record, the Triconnex and the Radix safety-related control system platforms, they were originally developed to IEC 61508 SIL 3, is that correct?
Yep, that's correct.
How did they go through the process? Because, these are systems that are getting installed even in old plants. What was that process like for them?
Well, what they did is they laid on a commercial grade dedication aspect to those systems. They did a critical digital review. They looked at what went into developing the system. So those systems, to get NRC approval, weren't able to just take credit for their SIL 3 certification. The way the NRC explains it, at the time that those systems were reviewed, the fact that they were SIL 3 certified was a good indicator of what went into the systems, but they still were considered non-nuclear and needed to go through commercial grade dedication before they were fully considered acceptable. So that's one of the use cases of Reg Guide 1.250 that could potentially be helpful, is in the future when one of those systems that's SIL 3 certified goes in front of the NRC for review, they'll still do a commercial grade dedication process, but they can use the guidance in 1.250 to be able to make a case for, well, you don't need to come and do another critical digital review or another commercial grade survey of the designers and manufacturers of the system, because Exida already did, or TÜV Rheinland already did, and Reg Guide 1.250 allows you to take credit for the work that that third party already did.
A lot of these new FPGA-based systems, they've got their own merits and safety cases associated with them. That's sort of why so many advanced reactors are going to field programmable gate array. Yeah, so many advanced reactor design companies are going towards FPGAs, and I guess that would be another topic for another show with a different guest, because it's just a whole nother can of worms. So many cans of worms in nuclear digital INC land. So yeah, we've got a different video in our library about the differences between commercial grade dedication and qualification, how these two terms are sort of similar, but in a traditional non-INC sense especially, they're very drastically different meanings and usually different teams of experts. They're just serving two different purposes. But in the world of digital INC, talk to me about how it sort of gets gray and these terms start to blur together.
Yeah. So
to hear the rest of this part of the conversation, please follow the link in the show notes to the free learning activity on this subject at nucleartalentboost.com. Now, back to the show.
even now, when you talk to some of the EPRI commercial grade dedication gurus, whenever you start talking about in digital, you're doing this critical digital review and you're looking at the design, they're still like, well, wait a second, commercial grade dedication has nothing to do with design suitability. And you can kind of get into a little bit of an argument with them there. A lot of times where I've experienced this becoming a more highlighted issue is when you start trying to talk internationally with regulators or people in nuclear industries outside the US that don't have this thing called 10 CFR 50 Appendix B QA programs, and they don't have 10 CFR Part 21 requirements that are built into our commercial grade dedication process. All of a sudden it's like, okay, why are you doing all this identification of critical characteristics? You've got your methods for verifying it. That's not part of our world. So it's like, okay, for them, they are addressing that the item with the approved design, the actual item being sent to the plant is of sufficient quality, is addressed a different way. But deciding is the design of the item suitable for the application is where there's commonality between any nation state, any regulatory structure. So it's like, okay, all of a sudden qualification is where it makes sense to find unity, find commonality, common positions on how that's going about being achieved. When you get into international, it's important to understand that the aspects of commercial grade dedication aren't universal, but the aspects of qualification are typically pretty universal with what people care about in terms of making sure an item is suitable for the application.
Nice.
So,
I guess one thing I really love about you, Andy, and there are many things to love about you, is that you spend so much time researching other industries and also just other countries' approach to all these digital INC aspects, which is all going towards saying, hey, there's other people in the world besides the American nuclear fleet that cares about having really reliable systems that are fail-safe and all these other things. And maybe one of the other tens of thousands of people that have spent their life thinking about this have come up with a few good ideas, and it fits really nicely with part of what we do at Nuclear Talent Scout through our Nuclear Talent Boost learning management system. There's lots of people that are in non-nuclear industries that do a lot of the same stuff. They probably do like the equivalent of aerospace industry qualifications for their softwares, and who would frankly be very good at doing nuclear INC software V&V work, but just don't know the language. We're making a bit of a handout little database thing that maps out, here's the industry aerospace, here's the industry oil and gas or chemical or automotive, and here's their equivalent of 10 CFR. It's still all guided by a CFR if you're in America. And here's their equivalent of qualification. Here's their equivalent of defect reporting. So their equivalent of 10 CFR 21. Here's their equivalent of the IEEE standard sets, which I think for my purposes of training a new talent pool for the nuclear industry, it sort of like gives them a Rosetta Stone of, oh, this is what the word for this is in the nuclear industry. This is their equivalent of the standard that I've been working with for many years. This similar thing is serving the purpose of, hey, where can I research the latest qualification techniques in industry X and country Y? And how can I get to the fruit of that and implement it in the USA?
Yeah, it should be a useful tool. In my master's thesis was kind of when I first started researching the different topics. Anytime I do anything with IAEA and dealing with different countries, it's something that just becomes a necessity to understand why the Germans feel so strongly about a particular thing, but the British feel completely the opposite direction, but they all want safe systems. So it's like, okay, how do we understand each other? A lot of it's just information that I'm keeping in my head. They would be good to write down.
And we are writing it down now, Andy.
Yeah.
It's going to be great. I think that the one last little thing is to tie together how IEEE 603 ropes in IEEE 1012, which matter-of-factly says, hey, you have a digital instrument in the nuclear plant, SIL 4, period.
Yeah, 603 doesn't actually have anything digital in it, but IEEE 603 lays out a set of design criteria, and then IEEE 7-4.3.2 relays all those same design criteria enhanced for digital. 7-4.3.2 is then what points to using IEEE 1012 and calls out particularly SIL 4 to be used. Mm-hmm. The important aspect there too is 603 and 7432 were really meant for the most safety significant systems in the plant. In the current fleet of light water reactor, that's the reactor protection system and SFAS. The problem is that so many things in the plant are classified as class 1E that it's like, okay, all of a sudden does IEEE 603 and IEEE 7432 apply to these systems? And if they do, that brings in IEEE 1012 SIL 4 V&V. And that's where things have really gone astray there. There's beginning to at least be a push of trying to understand how do we get more safety classifications. In the more European-centric set of nuclear standards, there's IEC 61226 that has a classification scheme that's got 3 safety levels instead of just the one. And so it's looking at, okay, let's maybe at least move in that direction.
Nice.
More work to be done.
That's sort of like what's on the horizon, some of the next hills to conquer for nuclear
Right.
digital INC. One thing that's come up throughout the course of this interview is how much smarter you are than me at this niche topic of yours, which is like my
I don't
niche
know
as
that that's
well,
true.
but yeah. Another like shameless plug for what Nuclear Talent Scout brings to the table. It's pretty easy to sound like an expert in things and convince other non-experts that you are a super expert, but there are actually real advanced experts that are worth their weight in gold. And then there's pretenders, in my opinion, or at least, people who aren't quite the instrument that you need to accomplish the thing that you need to do. And so the value that I hope to give people is to highlight who the real nuclear talents are out in the world, such as yourself, and all these really great insights that you bring to the table that other people can go years before they realize they've been overlooking this.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
One thing to talk about is that me and you both sort of had our start into nuclear digital INC land through working at commercial grade dedication and equipment qualification laboratories. We were there actually touching these widgets, getting intimately familiar with them and shaking them on tables and touching them with calipers and all these other things, right? I'd like to get your take on what you valued about that experience and how you think it has shaped you as an engineer, the unique insights and value that that experience gives you over someone who doesn't have that experience.
Yeah, I definitely think there's always value in working hands-on with equipment, that it's something that you can just get a better insight on how things work, what matters, and how to best write a procedure for someone else that has to test it. If you've never actually operated it, it's a whole lot harder to describe to somebody else in a document how they're supposed to operate it. Just having some kind of a sense before the test is even performed, once you've done it enough, you can kind of get a feel for where the issues are likely going to be, whether it's EMC testing or seismic testing or whatever it is that you've got some kind of functional test. Being able to actually work with the devices themselves gives you a deeper insight that as time goes on just makes you quicker and more capable to identify issues and know the best way to resolve those.
Yeah, some design engineer who's never touched a bolt in their life is just out there designing this system that they think is going to survive an earthquake and 10 other things. You're just sitting there, you're just like, I know it's going to break here, here, and here when we put it on that seismic table. If you could have just put a bolt here, here, and there, you could have prevented 2 years worth of critical path slip. But you didn't have my insight, so I'm just going to test it on the tail end. Yeah.
Yep, that equation said it was going to be fine.
Yeah, right. I definitely was that design engineer who'd never touched a bolt in his life before I got to work at the CGD lab. So I am thankful, and it sort of has given me an impression for, oh man, like this can get really bad and out of control.
And for me, that's a major path for how I initially got into looking at how other industries do things. It was on a critical digital review activity at a manufacturer's facility where I first experienced the manufacturer saying, hey, all these questions you keep asking about this product that you're trying to do this commercial grade dedication on. Well, I've got this other product over here that's still certified that I've already done all these things that you're asking for. Why don't you ask about that product instead of the one you're asking about? It was like, oh, hey, maybe I should look into that.
Yeah, right.
So that was helpful for that path as well.
I think the other thing I value about anyone who has any laboratory experience at all in their resume, and especially someone who's actually done nuclear commercial grade dedication or equipment qualification, there's so much ink spilt arguing about whether something should be safety related or not. And it sort of all triggers whether you have to go through the process of like doing all this. And people just lose a sense for not every safety related piece of equipment is the same amount of money to make safety related and do all the paperwork for, right? People can be penny wise and pound foolish very often in these things. Like they'll spend, let's say, 8 months and like $1 million proving why this formerly safety related thing can get classified as non-safety related. But for $100,000 in 1 month, I could have in the CGD lab made safety related for you. So it's like pick your battles, and people just have no idea the magnitude of the battles that they're fighting and the magnitude of effort that it's really saving. I gave that an example, but it can go just the opposite way. People are just like, oh, it's fine, we'll just make it safety related and everything will be fine. And then it's just like, no, you don't understand. This is going to take a bajillion tries and millions of dollars to prove that this widget really does this when the world's going to hell in a handbasket.
Exactly. A lot of times it seems like the transition from analog to digital is struggling with that, because before these things were digital, it was significantly easier to do commercial grade dedication on it, so they more conservatively classified things as Class 1E or safety related, whatever the right term for the particular plant is. Now that's one of the struggles with digital. It's like, well, these things actually would make sense to be non-safety, to where you can take things that are safety related but say they're low safety significance.
Right.
And that's helping, but that's the current topic of ongoing work right now as well, is figuring out, okay, when something is Class 1E, but it's considered low safety significant, what has to be done? Commercial grade dedication doesn't traditionally fully apply. So that's trying to address that issue of originally things were more conservatively made safety related. At the time it wasn't an issue, but as things are moving to be digital, like you're saying, the effort for making it safety related makes it worth looking at to say, hey, maybe making it non-safety would make sense here.
I've heard commercial grade dedication referred to as this magical pixie dust that you can sprinkle on commercial items and somehow make them fail proof and safety related. And it's really like a dark art, and like, you know, what are these people doing that makes this component so super all of a sudden? I think that it's magnified by like a whole nother order of magnitude when you talk about the digital component commercial grade dedication. The real dark arts, only the super sinister lords know how to control. You're certainly one of them. Certainly this is going to save some company a whole bunch of time and money and deserves to be paid quite well for it. And then as a final bit of chit chat, the other similarity that we have that is another pretty rare thing in the world is that we both have 5 kids.
That's true.
All of mine are very young, but you're actually paying for a wedding this summer. So congratulations, right?
Thank you. Yes. Yeah. So my oldest 4 are sibling set that we adopted out of foster care several years back. So they were mostly middle schoolers when they became a part of our family. And so yeah, my oldest daughter is getting married in about a month from now. So yeah, it's a busy, fun, exciting time. And then to follow my older kids up, we've got our 11-year-old that just graduated from elementary school. She was very excited about graduating, and I was like, I'll get excited when you graduate from high school. She felt I should be more excited, but
I mean, it's such a big need in society, foster parents in general, especially people willing to take an entire set of siblings. I know the foster care system very rarely finds a soul that's willing to take that on. And so thank you for your service to the world. I might start calling you St. Andrew, but
it's not necessary.
But being the father of a large family, how has that helped you in your professional career?
I would say it's helped in a couple ways. I think it allows me to keep a better perspective on life. There's always things going on when you've got 5 kids. It forces a little bit more work-life balance to make sure that you're being efficient with your time, that you're making sure the right amount of energy goes to the right things. A professional crisis can sometimes be a big deal, but sometimes while others are ramping up and getting really anxious and excited, I think having a lot more going on outside of work helps me have a little bit more balanced perspective on the situation, and allows me to be a little bit more level-headed.
Yeah, I've found that to be true as well. As a younger man, I used to just be able to put in 70 or 80 hours a week before I had a family, and I would look at all these other people who weren't and just be like, what's wrong with you? Don't you like believe in the nuclear promise? Like, we all have to be out here. It's very easy to feel like being a workaholic is a virtue. It's also just like the easy button that like, oh, if I have a lot of work, I'm just going to put in a lot of time. But when your time starts to get eaten in your personal life, you have to be more efficient, right? It's the only way to keep your head above water. Some people go their whole life without being forced into needing to learn the skill of time management and getting more efficient because they just throw hours at everything. Yeah, that's very insightful.
I think also now being an independent contractor, it forces you, when there's a deadline, you got to do what you got to do to get work done. So it's a push for, okay, I know I have to get this work done, but I know there's these other pressures. It helps you stay focused through the workday, because it's like, okay, I don't need to be getting distracted by all the things that can be distracting through the workday. You got to maintain work-life balance, but you also got to get your work done.
That's right, yeah. No one is more highly incentivized to find creative ways to get more work done in less time than someone who has a beautiful family to go home to that wants to see them. So I also imagine having 5 kids yelling at you, deriding you, and spitting on you. It keeps you humble, I suppose, right?
Yeah, I would say that's accurate. I try to avoid those situations, but
yeah, well, sure.
Definitely dealing with middle school, teenager range causes you to have to grow in humility and lots of patience.
Yeah. I mean, you're such a soft-spoken, pretty humble guy, but like you're at the forefront of one of the most in-demand industries. You know, you could easily just be a selfish, self-centered, prideful person, but you stay humble, and that's another thing I really like about you. So
thank you. I appreciate that.
Thanks so much, Andy, for coming on the show and for giving your lessons in our Nuclear Talent Boost website. Any parting words?
Yeah, I hope what I've shared has been helpful. I definitely see the key to a lot of this is understanding the deep fundamentals of what makes a system safe. So the more you can understand those fundamentals, the better you can translate between different terminologies, different industries, different nation-state regulatory structures. Digging into understanding those fundamentals of what makes a system safe, you'll be on the right path.
Awesome. Perfect parting advice. So how can people get a hold of you? Because you do nuclear digital INC consulting and you do paid training classes as well, where people can get sort of more personal attention from you. How do people get a hold of you?
Yeah, just shooting me an email is probably the best way, or send me a message on LinkedIn. My email is andrew.nack at rivermistengineering.com. Either of those 2 ways would get to me.
Excellent.
We hope you enjoyed the show. We're helping solve the energy crisis for our children and the world by addressing the nuclear talent shortage. Please help us by liking, sharing, and subscribing, registering on nucleartalentboost.com, and telling your human resources and procurement departments you'd like to work with nucleartalentscout.com for all your staffing needs.